Very interesting. Hey, gentlemen, we're going to take a slight detour here.
Yeah.
Staying on drugs, however, staying on drugs. And Guillermo, SARMs, let's focus on SARMs and various peptides that, let's say athletes are taking them, bodybuilders are taking them. Talk first about SARMs, because oddly enough, when I have my sports nutrition course, young kids, we're talking 18 to 20-year-olds, I sort of gauge what people are talking about by the questions they ask me. And they've been asking me lately a lot about SARMs. So give us sort of your bird's eye view of SARMs.
Yeah, so SARMs are a very interesting compound. So they're selective androgen receptor modulators that are going to be target the androgen receptor kind of specifically. And obviously, androgens work on the androgen receptor primarily. There's different ways in which the androgens work, but the primary mechanism is through the androgen receptor. What happens though is, because there are androgen receptors in more than just muscle, there's androgen receptors in prostate, androgen receptors in all different parts. Whenever that's exposed, you're going to have different mechanisms of action that are going to occur when different tissues are targeted with the different androgen receptors. So what happens with these SARMs, what you're trying to really do is trying to minimize the negative side effects of the anabolic steroid by basically being selective in basically only going to the tissue that you really want it, which would be the skeletal muscle. So in theory, it sounds really good. But what we're seeing now is, well, first and foremost, there's very few studies on the on the SARMs, so that we don't have a lot of data on them in comparison to anabolic steroids, which was researched, since the 30s.
Give us the name. I'm sorry, Guillermo. Give us the name of some popular SARMs that you might see, being sold illegally or legally.
Oh gosh, there's a ton. I actually listed a few. So there was a case study done on LGD 4043. There's RAD 140. There's LDG 4033. There's PF 0626014. There is GSK 2881078. So I mean, there's really and I'm just naming like a handful of them. So some of these, I mean, there's so many of them that you may see out there, and some are like GlaxoSmithKline has that GSK one, which they did some initial investigations on. And all of this came about like in the late 90s, around 1997, 98. And then over the last 20-ish years, there's been more and more. But of course, you can buy it on the internet, and it's kind of like the compounding pharmacy. So people can make them, essentially in a bathtub, and make some of these compounds, and then they sell them as research only compounds. So it actually says on the label when you buy them, it's like, hey, for research only, but it's really research on yourself, because there's no clinical research being done on this for the most part. The ones that are doing them are spending a pretty penny on them. And the reality is there's not a lot of good data and significant amount of data to kind of back up what they're doing. Now, there are some potential clinical uses for some of these, which is where the investigation came about. So people with cancer, people with osteoporosis, people with sarcopenia, that's where it kind of came about for some of the clinical uses. And the reason for that is because, again, when you're using, because it's selective, you're going to basically avoid, theoretically, the negative side effects of the androgens, right? So if you're a female, for example, virilization is something that's going to be something that you're concerned about, unless you're trying to be a transgender, female to male, right? That would be a desired side effect for those individuals. But for most female athletes that want to remain female, virilization is something that's very real. So this is where the SARMs kind of ticks the box. The same thing with things such as like maybe male pattern baldness, or maybe prostate components, or erythrocytosis is something that you may want to look at, with which are side effects of the androgen when you're utilizing it. So that's why these particular drugs were developed. But as we're seeing some of the data, it's actually quite interesting. So first and foremost, I'm going to start with one recent study that was done in Australia, where they actually looked at internet population of, hey, let me just see if I can buy SARMs off the internet. And they actually found like, yeah, you can buy it pretty easily. And if I remember the data specifically, I read it this morning. It was something like there were over 130 compounds that were available, but 94 of them had some sort of contamination or other drugs in them. So you don't necessarily, what's on the label is not necessarily what's on the label, or they may be laced with maybe another anabolic substance. So it might have a little bit of testosterone or a little bit of the androgen. So even though it's saying SARM, it does have the SARM in there, but the dosage that's in there is not necessarily the dosage that you're getting, and it may be mixed with other contaminants, some of which may be helping you get the results you want and still getting some of the side effects, and some of which may also be deleterious, heavy metals and things of that nature. Only about less than a third of them, actually closer to like 20% of them, were actually legit good compounds, or they actually did the chemical analysis. So basically, man, it's not a good number. We're only 80% are not good. So that's a pretty big gamble. We're 2 out of 10 you're going to get are going to be the good ones. So
Guillermo, can I just ask? I'm sorry. Are they delivered exclusively orally, or are they injectable, or they're just oral SARMs?
Most of these are oral, which is kind of the other driving thing for them, is that why it's sometimes injecting a substance, whether it's subcutaneously or intramuscularly, can drive some people away. But even as we know, even with anabolic steroid use, it sounds safer, quote unquote, to swallow a pill, but we know that actually causes the most deleterious side effects. Is the orals are the ones that are going to be worse for you than the injectable. So in this regard, when we actually see some of the case studies, this is what we actually see. We see elevated liver enzymes, so the ALTs. You see the drug-induced liver injury in the literature in some of the case studies. You also see some of the deleterious effects in the triglycerides are elevated, LDLs are elevated, HDLs are decrease over time. So you kind of see the same thing occur over time. Dr. Darren Willoughby actually published a case study on an individual that was using the LGD 4033 SARM. He was also stacking it with the MK677, which is a peptide, which is a GH secretagogue. So they were using both of those together, and then they basically saw. So they didn't prescribe that to the individual. The individual was just going to do that anyway. He just came into the lab, and then they did pre and post testing on strength. They looked at body composition, and they did it basically pre-cycle, during the cycle, and then post-cycle. And not surprisingly, this individual did gain lean body mass. They gained body mass in general. They gained lean body mass, but interestingly, they also gained fat mass, actually quite a bit of fat mass at the same time. They did get stronger, and some of the literature on the SARMs actually doesn't necessarily show that people get stronger per se. They do gain the lean mass and the body mass, but they don't necessarily get stronger. There's a couple of case studies that have also been published where individuals don't get stronger. Of course, the caveat to this case study was that they were also using the growth hormone secretagogue. So you don't know, which is doing which in this.
It is still, I'm sorry, Edwin, go on.
One thing I've always been curious about when it comes to peptides, and I think you kind of explained that maybe it's something else, is the fact that they're oral and the very nature of a peptide of denaturation in an acidic environment. How is it that that these are able to even have an effect to even make it past first pass, get into circulation? Because my understanding is most peptide bonds, or most peptides themselves, can't survive at least without significant denaturation in the acidic environment of like the 1.5 to 2 pH of the stomach. I've never understood that.
Yeah, no, it was surprising to me too when I read it, because I mean, it's not like it's got some sort of, it's not like alkylated at the 17th carbon atom like these other anabolics are. So which allowed for that first pass kind of go through to be able to go through it. So I was surprised as well. But somehow they're getting through. So it may be that the way that peptides are made, that they're able to pass through and get some of this some of the benefits from there. But what I will say is, what we see over and over again is we see that we get basically, I'm going to say, a small percentage of the benefits of anabolic steroids, but all the side effects. So it's really kind of like why, I mean, in this particular case study, again, they gained total lean mass, they gained body fat, but they lost bone mineral content, they lost bone mineral density, the serum lipid biomarkers like cholesterol increase, triglycerides, low density lipoprotein, high density lipoprotein decrease, LDL increase. So we see all of these different biomarkers that occur. And then on top of that, it also messes with your HPTA axis. So afterward, now your testosterone levels are still in the pits. Your sex hormone binding globulin is not where it should be. So you actually have now you're hypogonadal on top of that, which is what you would get with the androgen. So that's very to me, that's very alarming when you're actually seeing, I'm not going to get as strong, I'm not going to get as big, but I'm going to get all the side effects. So why use it? The only population where I see where it might be more enticing would be for the female athlete, because they're not going to get the virilization component of the anabolic steroid use, and they may get some of the effects of the gaining lean body mass, for example. So that you see a lot of athletes use these in the female, like the bikini circuit. You may hear them utilizing this quite a bit. But still, I mean, there's a lot more data on, again, especially now with the transgender stuff. Like, we actually know for females, like, where the threshold is. If you're looking at the transgender literature, you can actually read information into at what dosages are these females becoming, a transgender male, right? So you basically go to a dosage that's much lower than that before you're going to convert and seeing these clinical manifestations take over. And then, the literature on there, you can monitor all of the blood biomarkers over time. Not only that, but the safety of the compound is going to be, testosterone is pretty easy to get. You can get pharmaceutical grade. If you're working with a physician, you can get that prescribed. And then you don't have to worry about, what kind of contaminants are in there, what kind of other substances are in there. So it makes it a lot easier to be able to monitor those biomarkers.
Yeah, I'm still puzzled mechanistically. Why would, at least in that case study, you gain fat mass and also lose bone mass?
Yeah, it was very interesting. And the reality is when you read the discussion, I mean, we basically say, we don't know. This is what happened. Like, there's some hypotheses that were postulated in there, but really there's not a lot of solid evidence in there. One did look at potentially like the increased dosage over time may actually have like a negative feedback loop that may cause some of this over time. But really, again, I think it's all unexplored. I don't think we really know enough, which is why, again, the FDA has not approved any of these drugs for any clinical application yet. And again, we just don't have a lot of evidence to know, how they work and how well they work. Regardless, we're still seeing a ton of people selling this stuff, a ton of people buying this stuff. They're utilizing it. And some of them are including polypharmacy in them. I actually published not a case study, just recently in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research, just at a local bodybuilding show. It was a survey looking at what kind of drugs they were using, what kind of dietary practices they were using for peak. But anyway, one of the questions was, what are the drugs and what are the dosages that you're using? And I actually saw both men and women report different types of SARMs as one of the drugs with appropriate dosages. And a few of them are doing polypharmacy, where they're using that in addition to maybe growth hormone or maybe even an androgen on top of that. So I mean, the reality is they don't know what they're doing, but they're doing it because, somebody said so.
So in summary, you can say that at least with androgens, and, there's a whole variety of androgens. I know there's a lot of data on testosterone and enanthate, you have TEST-CIP, and you have really a whole host of different anabolic steroids that with SARMs, you get a little bit of the benefit, just so I'm right, just so I have it clear, but a lot of the side effects, in fact, the side effects tend to be much more pronounced compared to the typical androgens that you might take. Like, for instance, the 1996 paper by BASSIN, 600 mgs of testananthate for 10 weeks. Really, there were no side effects. So, and they gained lean mass and strength, which is, and that's without exercise, which I thought, that's quite fascinating. So why people are always looking for something to replace androgens, when I've always said, well, androgens are actually for a healthy male are actually quite safe. What do you think, doctors?
You mentioned something at ISSN, Dr. Escalante. Do you think you mentioned about when a patient doesn't have a physician who is understanding of this, they tend to, either try to go into other areas, or because there's that stigma that they're getting. Do you think that that may be a piece of why, as to they're always told androgen equals bad, but then they're like, oh, but this is sold over the counter. It's over the counter. It must be good, or else it wouldn't be over the counter. Do you think that there's that mental game, like, well, I'm not doing anything wrong because androgens are wrong because everybody keeps saying, even the doctor says so. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a stigma with that, which again, I mean, I wish there was more education in terms of, I mean, having them be a class 3 controlled substance doesn't help. I mean, it has bad stigma all the way around, right? So people are afraid to say anything about it. I mean, that's why most people deny it, because why would you say that you're taking an illegal substance? I mean, it's kind of like, who's going to advertise that they do, cocaine all the time, right? I mean, it's like, you're probably not going to freely advertise that, right? And that's the stigma that it has with some of these compounds. And you're right. I think when people think well, I can buy it over the counter, that means or I can buy it on the internet. I mean, you can buy the anabolics over the internet too, but I think some of these are a little bit easier to buy than some of the other anabolics that are available. So there's definitely a stigma with a lot of these drugs, for sure.
We're short of time, so I wanted to get to this, Dr. Escalante. The peptides that promote the secretion of GH, effects on body composition, effects on performance in normal healthy males. Go.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, again, with all of these peptides, there is some promising literature on there, but again, at the end of the day, we're basically just trying to increase growth hormone levels one way or another. And then ultimately, we want to basically increase insulin growth like factor, because that's basically the way all of these drugs work. But to me, it's like, again, you're trying to kind of find, there's more than one way to reach the goal. But why not find the most direct route? And to me, again, if we have a lot of clinical applications in human growth hormone that's been around for many years. We know what the dosages are. We know if it's a pharmaceutical grade type of human growth hormone, we know what we're getting. So I think, and we have a ton of clinical data on that with HIV patients, with a lot of different clinical populations. So why are we going to mess around with some of these other ones where you're going to get, again, maybe the same effect, but you don't know the other potential side effects that may come with it, or if it's even going to work, because some of the trials, it doesn't work on everybody. We see some mixed literature as well. So for me, I'm always, first look at what is most research and has the most literature available on there, clinical data on there, and then you can make your decisions from there and utilize what has been clinically documented and to drive your decisions. To me, that's going to be the best way about it, because then you know what the side effects are, what dosages to utilize, and you can just make better choices in that regard.
So, Guillermo, can I just ask you and Edwin quickly on this, because I know nothing about, I'm not well versed on either, but it seems too that the cost of going the clinical route, the well-established route, is equal to buying the SARMs anyway. Am I right? Like, it's not that expensive to utilize the testosterone as a therapy if you wanted the pharmaceutical grade or the growth hormone. And the SARMs they're buying don't seem to be that cheap either. So why wouldn't you go the safer route, and one that's probably has equal value as far as money goes and a monetary investment?
Yeah, I think that the main thing comes down to, is the physician going to, no physician is going to be able to clinically prescribe substance X, even testosterone, unless you're a hypogonadal, for example, right? So I think that becomes the issue, is the first biomarker. If you're a 22-year-old kid who can't go to the doctor to get some of this, so you what are you going to do?
Okay.
So then, I would say if you're going to cross that bridge, then the next step would be, find as close to a pharma, or you can even find pharmaceutical grade. Sometimes you may have to do a little more digging of the actual compounds that you're going to find. If not, then you're going to have to resort to the underground labs. But then now you have a, that's a pretty crazy game. You don't know what you're getting at that point in time. Yeah. Even though there are some legitimately underground labs that do produce good quality stuff, but that's not the majority of them.
Got it.
Edwin, any final comments on any of this stuff? Fascinating.
I think that by and large, that when individuals like who are interested in SARMs for increase in hypertrophy or performance, or with GLP-1s, there's an inherent need to attain some kind of physical change. And patients are going to try to find whatever they can. It's important for us to be able to drive them to vetted, quantifiable, and approved medications that are actually contain what we know them to actually contain. I didn't really even think about it until Dr. Escalante mentioned that even SARMs purchased somewhere else, we don't necessarily know what's in them. And with patients, their need to hopefully obtain their goals sometimes shadow their better judgment and could potentially put them in harm's way. So whether it be weight loss, whether it be muscle growth, having at least giving them the knowledge, giving them the comfort of knowing that you can have an open conversation with me about either or is probably the most important thing. Because if they don't feel comfortable, they can talk to the professional. They know they can talk to, the boy who's pushing 450 in the corner over there. I know he'll talk to me, and I know he'll tell me something. I would rather them come to someone like us instead of someone like that. Not judging that person, but we're going to be coming from evidence-based purposes and quantifiable data. And that's what's important for the patient and for the athlete and for our clients.
Any final words, Tony?
No, I learned a lot. I'm definitely hesitant to do any SARMs, anything with really sounds name-wise like a radioactive isotope, and somehow bypasses a million years of evolutionary digestion. Okay. If you put in a peptide that makes it through a sub-2 pH, I'm out, man. Yeah, but this was fascinating. These are areas I know nothing about, even the therapies, TRT and all, so learned a good deal. And I think this is extremely helpful for those who have an interest in health, body composition, training, and even just looking better.
Hey, Dr. Davila, Dr. Escalante, tell the audience where people can find more information about you if they want to reach out to you, Dr. Davila.
So best way to get a hold of me right now is through email. My email is edwin.davila23@gmail.com. Apparently I'm on Instagram. I still don't know how it works. I put things and
I'm gonna find you.
They're there. I will be working in San Antonio probably next year with the WellMed group, but best way is email and Instagram, and I'm trying my best to, if anybody has any questions more in terms, and there's going to be even more questions. There's a new medication that just came out. I joke you not, a brand new GLP-1 GIP glucagon tri medication that actually is beating all the ones that are right now, and that's become it's the latest right now. Phase 2 trial saying 24.2% overall loss of body weight. These things are not going anywhere, and the more we talk about them, the more we know about them, because we know people are going to be taking them. So please email, Instagram.
What's your Instagram handle, Dr. Davila?
How do I know that? I don't know how that works. Like,
well, I'm telling mine. Go to your Instagram, and then whatever your name is, that's your Instagram handle on Instagram.
I'll be damned. Okay, my wife made it for me. So it says Dr. Davila _DO.
There you go. So
Dr.
it's
Davila.
at Dr. Davila _DO.
Dr. Davila _DO. Wow.
So now in the future, you know how to market yourself on Instagram.
Thank you.
So my Instagram handle is spelled out at Dr. GFit. So spell out Dr. GFit. Not just DR, Dr. GFit, all one word. And then that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. You can also find me on, you can Google me pretty easy, and you can find my contact information at the university. That's pretty easy to do as well. But I'm definitely on Instagram or even Facebook. You can find me on all of those.
Well, gentlemen, this has been fascinating. It's been a fun conversation. I appreciate your time. Good doctors, and hey, enjoy the rest of the week.